What is up, YouTube? Brian here, back again with another video, and today we're going to do something a little fun. I like doing this video just for me. We're going back to some rod snob content, and it is the end of the season here in Minnesota. We're early December. The boats are put away. The lakes are locked up. And I'm going through my rod and reel collection, and a couple years ago I did this video, and I didn't do it last year, but we're going to bring back what were my top 5 producing rods for largemouth? And I'm going to do another video that I'm going to drop in a couple days on my top 5 performing rods for smallmouth. So I fish a lot of largemouth and I fish a lot of smallmouth. I mostly fish largemouth here in Minnesota. I am in a local bass club, so I do a lot of my largemouth fishing on grass lakes here in Minnesota. But on the weekends, I'm running off to northwest Wisconsin and I'm fishing a lot of rocky, clear, natural Wisconsin lakes for smallmouth. So I actually have completely different loadouts from when I'm practicing for tournaments and fun fishing around here in the metro area of Minnesota versus the stuff I bring with me when I go hit a bunch of random natural lakes and some rivers in Wisconsin. So I'm going to do 2 different videos because there's some overlap. There's some stuff that I love on smallmouth fishing that I don't necessarily always use when I'm largemouth fishing. So anyway, today, this video right here, my top 5 rods and reel combos that I use for largemouth fishing in this year, 2020. Now, this isn't like my favorite rods. I have a lot of rods that I use, a lot of combos I use for one-off things like topwater and swim jigs and all this kind of stuff. This is literally the 5 rods I caught the most largemouth bass on this season. I'm just like, what are my rods and combos that I caught the most volume of fish on, period. That's the only qualifier for this list. Now, we're going to start it off. If you've been following my channel, this might not surprise any of you, but my number one producing rod all summer for me was the Daiwa Steez AGS Bottom Contact 2. You might see this rod also pop up on my smallmouth video, but anyway, I love this rod. If I could marry one of my fishing rods, this would be the one. This would be my bride to be. This rod is fantastic. Now, what I use this rod mostly for all summer was fishing Texas rigs in grass. So here in Minnesota, we have a ton of grass. All of our lakes have milfoil, coontail, curly-tail pondweed, eelgrass, all sorts of just random grass in Minnesota, reeds, lily pads. This rod pretty much had a Texas rig on it all year long. I fished a lot of largemouth, whether it's shallow grass, whether I'm fishing offshore, grass edges, random sporadic grass patches on islands and humps, anything that was vegetation, this rod is on the deck, which subsequently means this rod is pretty much on the deck all season. So I love this rod for Texas rigging. I also had a lot of success throwing Carolina rigs on this rod for largemouth and smallmouth. Overall, this is just the most amazing Texas rig flipping rod I've used, period. I just love this thing. It's super sensitive, has tons of power. It's really balanced well. It feels light in the hand, super crisp. I got it paired with a Daiwa Steez A in the 7-speed. All year I ran 15-pound Seaguar Invisix fluorocarbon on this rod, but mostly just had a Texas rig with an EWG ringed hook on it, throwing a lot of creature baits, a lot of worms, a lot of beaver-style baits. This is just my all-purpose #1 Texas rig rod. Can use it up shallow, use it out deep. It's just, this rod is amazing. Anyway, enough gushing about the Steez Bottom Contact 2. It's my main. Okay, number 2. The rod that I used a lot this year, and I caught a lot of dang fish on it, was the Megabass Super Destroyer. So this is the Megabass P5 Super Destroyer. I did a review video of this fairly recently. This rod ended up being used a lot because, man, this is the most fun dock fishing setup I've ever had. Like, I just love going, I would purposely go find docks on the lake just to use this combo. Like, it's so much fun to use. I was like, I don't know if there's a dock bite. There might be, but I'm going to go try anyways because this combo is so freaking fun to fish. So I got it paired with the Daiwa Steez SV, so the magnesium version of the Steez. And I'm using 15-pound Tatsu, so the most bougie, nice line you can get. And I almost always had some kind of jig tied on this rod, whether it was a 3/8, a half. I use a lot of different jigs. Currently, I have the Stealth Fighter jig on here, but I use some OSP jigs, some Bass Tech jigs, basically any 3/8 ounce or half ounce jig was tied onto this rod all year, and this was my shallow water weapon. So anytime I'm up around docks, swimming docks, marinas, shallow wood, this is a really great rod for throwing around shallow wood. Can hit rock piles with this thing. It's just, the Super Destroyer is just an insanely fun rod to fish shallow cover with. And that's what I did all season with this thing. This rod and the Steez AGS rod were pretty much mainstays on my deck all year when I was fishing for largemouth. All right. The other bait caster that I have to talk about is my flipping stick. So in the last few years, I've really rekindled my love for flipping heavy cover, especially in the middle of summer in Minnesota. So when we get into that zone of like, it's the middle of summer, it's hot, it's August, going around flipping heavy in shallow, dense cover really can get a lot of action here in Minnesota. So I'm talking like shallow reeds, shallow lily pads, any matted vegetation. I mean, I've gone up with this. Anyway, this is the rod. This is the 7-Eleven Steez flip pitch punch. It's the 7-Eleven Steez AGS flipping stick. I always had a 3/4 to a 1 ounce weight on this thing with the EWG ringed hook as usual. But this was, and I got 50-pound Seaguar Smackdown braid on this thing. But man, flipping heavy in Minnesota in the middle of summer is so much fun. You just find some lily pads, punch, 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 bite, thunk, get that fish out of there. It's just a blast. And this particular rod, I felt super confident being able to get as many fish out of that cover as possible. Rekindled, like I like big flipping heavy sticks. Yes, I'm absolutely a finesse spinning rod addict. I love doing that stuff, but I'm not opposed to raising my motor up, getting in that shallow 2 foot of water and just flipping a 1 ounce weight into lily pads and hopefully catching a couple fish. So anyway, I always had a flipping stick most of the time when I was out largemouth fishing. So this rod does not fit in my rod locker, so I have to purposely put this on the deck or throw it in my truck when I get to like bust it out, throw it on top. So if there are situations where I went out to Wisconsin where I knew I might flip, but I didn't really want to bring my flipping stick, I would always bring my Megabass TS Poker. So the TS Poker is my other flipping stick. It's smaller, fits in a rod locker. When I couldn't bring this thing with me, the TS Poker was the rod that I was throwing, that 1 ounce flipping weight into heavy cover with. So a shout out to the TS Poker, which was my stand-in for this rod if I wasn't able to throw it on my deck. Or stick it in my, it doesn't fit in the locker. Okay. The last 2 rods are going to be spinning rods, and I'm going to do one honorable mention. You'll save that at the end. It'll be a surprise. So my first spinning rod that I caught the most amount of largemouth with this year is most definitely the Addermine. So this is the Megabass US Destroyer Addermine. It is being re-released in the P5 lineup. Probably will be out by this spring. This rod is amazing. I almost had a Ned rig tied onto this rod almost all the time. This has basically become my #1 Ned rig setup, and thus subsequently it's mostly on the deck, especially during tournaments where we're fishing some offshore grass or we're fishing some deeper water and we know there's fish there. The Ned rig will usually get bit. It's just a confidence bait for me personally. I just love fishing a Ned rig. And fishing it on this particular combo is amazing. Right now I have I just got this reel actually. I was just kind of test fitting on here. This is an X-Sense, the new Shimano X-Sense 3000. But I actually was running the Daiwa MQ Ballistic on this rod all summer. So that's usually the reel that was on this rod. So I love the Daiwa Ballistics that was on this rod, and it performed fantastically. So the Megabass US Destroyer Addermine is still a goat. It's insanely sensitive. Fish is really crisp. You can pull fish out of grass with this thing. I cannot gush enough about the Addermine. Fantastic rod. Mostly had an Ned rig on it almost all season and caught a crap ton of largemouth and smallmouth and crappies and walleye. I caught so many species on this rod with a Ned rig. Just a fun rod. I always have it pull, like whenever I'm at a tournament, out comes the Addermine with the Ned rig because it's going to get used. All right, the last rod, and this is a rod that I'm really, really, really warmed up to this year, is the new NRX Plus 852S. Now I'm going to be dropping a specific rod review video on this because it's completely, it really is a lot different than the old A52S. This is the new NRX Plus. I have it paired with this is the reel I ran all year. This is the Steez, I'm sorry, not the Steez. This is the Shimano Xsense 4000, but this is the old Shimano Xsense. This is the one that's based on the Stella platform. I have 10-pound Daiwa J-Braid Grand, and I always ran it to an 8-pound Seaguar Invisix fluorocarbon leader. Now, this rod does two things for me all year. Number one, this is my main Wacky Senko rod. I do use the Conquest that I have a lot, but this is the rod that I mostly had out. So this rod kind of did triple duty. Wacky Senkos, around docks, fishing shallow. Also, this is the greatest shaky head rod of all time, so I either had a shaky head on this thing or a wacky worm. But also, this thing could pretty much do other things, like if I needed to throw a Ned rig on, could absolutely throw it on this. Needed a paddle tail swim bait, could throw it on this. If I needed a Nico rig, I could throw it on this. This is just a really great all-around rod for finesse tactics. Almost always had a shaky head or Senko on it, but if I needed to just do something else real quick, just cut off. This basically does everything, and it is literally one of the greatest spinning rods ever built by human hands. I mean, the A52S is amazing. The NRX Plus version of the A52S is even more amazing because you got this fantastic grip on this thing. I love this grip. It's the same grip as the Shimano Conquest. So all the fixes and upgrades they did in the NRX line really shines through on the A52S. Fantastic rod. Love this thing. Caught a ton of fish with this rod this year. All right, so I got to do one honorable mention because this is a rod that I really, really want to include in the lineup. It almost bumped out the flipping stick, but this is this is one of my favorite rods that I own of all time, is the Megabass P5 US Destroyer Javelin. This rod is amazing. This is the 7'5". I've already done a video on this years ago, but I still managed to find my way to use this rod all the time. What I like the Javelin for is it is my go-to rod for buzzbaits. It is my go-to rod for spinnerbaits. It is my go-to rod for bigger square bills. Also, it can deep crank, so I can throw like a Deep X300 on this thing. Anything that runs 8 foot or deeper is perfectly cool on the Javelin. And it's an awesome chatterbait rod when you're trying to rip chatterbaits out of grass. So if you're fishing deeper water where there's a gap between the surface and the grass, and you want that chatterbait to kind of come across, hit that grass, and then rip it out, that's what I'm using the Javelin for. So it's become like my spinnerbait, chatterbait, buzzbait, crankbait, everything rod. It's just an awesome rod, and it was always found its way on my deck. Oh, wake baits. It's a great wake bait rod. So I was trying to throw like lots of different top waters, like a lot of different wake bait top waters. You know, there's a lot of like the depths and the megabasses and all these things. Killer wake bait rod. It's just a really great, can do a lot of stuff really well rod. Love the Javelin. When this comes out again in the P5 lineup, I think people are going to fall in love with this rod. I love the US version. I have found my way to use this rod all the time. I'm a big, big, big fan of it. So I'm going to keep scraping the ceiling because these are very long rods. Anyway, I hope that was entertaining. If you have any questions about these rods, please leave a comment down in the comment section. As usual, follow me on Instagram. Got a lot of content going on there, and I'm going to be doing part 2 of this video with the smallmouth edition. Look for that coming in the next couple of days, and if you've made it this far, please hit like and subscribe. Would very much appreciate it, and we'll see you on the next one.